this moment. So what was the motivation of this project? When I finished my master thesis in Universidad Externado, I found that there is a very big inequality in the access of higher education between people in the low income levels and people in the high income levels. So what we see here is that young people in the lowest quintile of incomes, the attendance rate, there is a big gap between the attendance rate in higher education between secondary, higher secondary and higher education. The same happens with people with the highest incomes. There is also a gap between higher education and higher secondary education and higher education in attendance rate, but the gap is bigger for people who are in the lowest income levels. In fact, this attendance rate is 3 times the attendance rate of the people in the lowest income levels. So we started to think maybe there is not only an inequality in the access to higher education, but there is also inequality in the quality of education. So maybe the people from the lowest income levels that attend a higher education system, they are not attending the best universities in Colombia. That's why we started to think about this problem. And when we started to search for literature that try to understand this problem between inequality of income and quality of higher education, we found a concept which was used mainly here in the United States, which was the concept of undermatch. So let me explain you what this concept is telling us, or how did we did the computation of this variable. We are going to assume that there are 3 higher education institutions who are in the top quartile of the average math score in Saber 11 in the case of Colombia. And these are the universities X, Y, and Z. And the institution that had the minimum average math score of the students admitted in that university is X, who had this average math score. And we are going to assume that there are 3 individuals. Each of them had a score in math in Saber 11, and each one of them attended a given higher education institution. So, for example, individual 1 attended a University A, which is not here in the top quartile. Individual 2 attended to University C, which is here in this quartile. And the last individual attended also University A. This person had a math score which is lower than this. So this person is going to be a missing observation in our data set, because we are going to focus only in students who had a very high score or a score which is higher than this. Individual 2 had a score which is greater than this. So this person and this person attended this university. So the value of undermatch is going to be 0 for this individual. And for the third individual, this person had a math score which is the highest, but this person attended University A, which is not in the top quartile. So this person is going to be considered as undermatched.
Anderson, just to clarify, so the first person is missing because his math score is lowest than the ones from the X, Y, Z variables, yeah? Like
yes.
Universities. Okay, perfect.
Yes. Now, the research questions that we want to answer in this part of the paper, because there are other questions that we are working on, but the ones that I'm going to present here are the following ones. How family and schools characteristics and also city of residence are related to college undermatch, and what group of variables, family characteristics, school characteristics, or city of residence is relatively more important. Um, some summary of the results. As we expected, people from families with the highest income levels have less probability to be undermatched. People that lived in very poor cities like Quibdó and Riohacha, they have higher probability of being undermatched in comparison to Pereira. And family characteristics and city of residence are relatively more important than schools characteristics. Why is it important, this research project? Because not only access to education, but quality of education is related to productivity of the workers in a given country. Is also related to economic growth. And the main focus is that it is completely related to social mobility, which is the topic that we are going to focus in the following slides. And understanding this can also help policymakers to understand how to reduce that inequality in education. For example, if it is better to improve access and quality of higher education, but from elevating the academic level of primary and secondary students, or if it is better to, for example, give credit or loans to people so they can have access to higher education. Okay, so let me explain this table. So in this table, we have 6 stratums. In Colombia, these stratums are related to this, in a given way, to the socioeconomic level of the family. Stratum 1 are associated with very low socioeconomic levels, while stratum 6 are associated with high socioeconomic levels. And here in the columns, I'm showing the quintiles of incomes of the graduates of the higher education institutions. So, for example, if a university is in the highest quintile, it is because their graduates have the highest income of the graduates, while if the university is here in the lowest quintile, it is because their graduates have the lowest incomes of in comparatively. So what
So
yes.
just to clarify, the quantiles are from the universities and the stratums are for the people. Yeah. So
Yes, yes.
I can see, like, in the test there is a question that asks you your stratum, and then what you took for the quantiles is like information from all the students, and you average it and say like, okay, this is quantile 1, and quantile 1 is the highest income and quantile 5 the lowest one.
The lowest, but for the universities. So the information for quintiles, I use the information from the Observatory of Education, or Observatorio Laboral de Educación, which is from the Ministry of Education, while the information from Stratums, I used the Saber 11. So that's what I did. So what we see here is that in general, individuals from the highest stratum, they are attending universities which are in the highest quintile of income of their graduates. So 74% of these people in this stratum are attending these types of university, while 47% of students in stratum 1 are attending universities who are in the lowest quintiles of income of their graduates. There is not only a difference between incomes, but also between the rates of the graduates that are working in this university. So in average, individuals in stratum 6 are attending universities whose rate of graduates that are working is 85%, while in average, individuals who are in stratum 1 are attending universities in which the average of the rate of graduates that are working is 73%. So this is like a kind of measure of quality of higher education, which is related to the labor market. But let's continue with not only the labor market outcomes, but also another measure of quality, which is related to the type of higher education institution. In Colombia, there are 4 types of higher education institutions. The first one is technical. They can be also technological, university, and university institutions. We see here that in general, university and university institutions, the people who are graduates from these types of higher education institutions, they have an average income which is higher than the graduates of technical and technological institutions.
Anderson, is that annually or is that monthly income?
I use no, is annually, and I deflected this information, and I use the data from, let me tell you. I use the information from 2012 to 2016 of the Observatory of Labor from the Ministry of Education.
Perfect.
And what we see here is that individuals in general, individuals from stratum 6, the 87% of them are attending universities, while the percentage of that percentage in stratum 1 is only 45%. And stratum 1 individuals tend to attend more to technical and technological universities in comparison to what happens with individuals in the stratum 6. And there is not only a difference between these higher education institutions regarding the income, but also regarding the rates of the graduates who are working. So this is like another measure of quality of education. But let's continue with that kind of analysis. There is another measure of quality of higher education, which is related to the process of accreditation of high quality. What we see here in this table is that people in 57% of stratum 1 individuals are attending unaccredited public higher education institutions, while 27% of them are attending unaccredited private higher education institutions. These percentages are much lower for people in stratum 6. They tend to attend higher education institutions which have accreditation of high quality. So this is like a first approximation of the problem. So there is still a big gap between the different types of measures of quality and income inequality in Colombia and income inequality here measured as the stratum. And here we see the following, which is more related to what we are going to do in the paper. Here we are using also quartiles of higher education institutions, which kind of measure the level of selectivity of each of these universities. These universities are in the highest quartile of Saber 11 students who were admitted, and these are universities who are in the lowest average Saber 11 score of the admitted students.
Anderson, a quick question. You took all the universities, regardless if they were like, so in Colombia, there are some institutions that are, how is it called? Certificadas, kind of, and other ones that are not. So you took the full sample. You didn't.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes. I did it that way.
Acreditadas, sorry.
Yes. I use all that information. So what we see here is that people from stratum 1, they tend to go to the less selective universities, while the opposite happens with individuals from stratum 6. They tend to attend those universities in which admitted students have the highest Saber 11 scores. So yes, we try to measure quality of higher education in many ways, using the market outcomes, using the accreditation, and using here the level of selectivity. And the first picture that we have is that there is a big gap in the quality of higher education that people are receiving, because it depends on their socioeconomic levels. So how to understand some of these results, and what are going to be the theoretical frameworks that we are going to use. From the point of view of the human capital theory, what it says is that without credit constraints, when people are rational, they are going to invest in education if the present value of the future flow is higher than the present value of the future flow of incomes without education. But also the human capital theory is telling us that it doesn't depend only on the decision is not only to invest in education or not to do it, but also the kind of education, the characteristics of the education that people are investing. So people are going to invest in an education from a quality J if the present value of making that decision is going to be higher than the present value of not investing in that kind of education. But also at the first stage, the human capital theory doesn't tell us without credit constraints why there is some people that have the same skills, and even in that case they make totally different decisions. So the assumption that needs to be relaxed here is that there are going to be credit constraints. So with credit constraints, the decisions of there are different decisions about investment in education, because people with higher budget restriction are going to have a different access to the credit market than people with a lower budget restriction. Another theoretical framework that is also useful is there is asymmetric information. So normally, people who attend a given university, they don't know the quality of the professors, they don't know the quality of the research. At the same time, the higher education institutions don't know the characteristics of the students more than the saber 11, and they try to do something in the admission process, like interviews or something like that, but they don't know really the level of skills of the students. But at the same time, employers tend to hire uh, people who comes from specific universities, because when people graduate from these universities, they are sending a signal to the market that they have given knowledge. So this theory of asymmetric information also help us to understand why people make different decisions. And there is also the concept of social capital, which says that there are some relations that are going to be uh, useful to understand these kind of decisions. So, for example, if you have parents who are entrepreneurs or directors, they are engaged in social relations which are totally different. If you have a parent who is a worker or a taxi driver, so these relations um, are going to be important when people decide to invest in education with specific characteristics. What we have seen in the literature review, well, I'm going to explain the three cases, which is the case in the USA, the Nordic countries, because that's a very important case, and the Colombia and the case of Colombia. In United States, there have been many works who have tried to understand why college undermatch here is very big. So, for example, these papers, the papers from Black, Curtis and Linkovi, Hosby and Avery, and Hosby and Turner, what they have tried to see if uh, people from the lowest income levels who have very high scores don't attend um, selective universities, maybe because they don't have information. And there is some evidence that that's what's going on here in the United States. Hosby and Turner, they did an RCT, and they found that when they gave information to the students, they there was an increase not only in enrollment and in the admission, in the process of application, but also in enrollment and attendance to top universities. Bastido and Jackie try to see if there are inequalities before people go to universities, and what they have found was the following, which is very interesting. They saw that enrollment in top universities has increased for people in the lowest incomes, but they also found that that increase has been even higher for people in the highest income levels. So there is still a big gap in the access to higher education to of the top universities. And there are other concepts that has been also explained, like social and cultural capital, measured by the relationship between how close the relationship between the parents and their sons is, and also the distance from the residents and the higher education institutions. A very special case is what is going on in the Nordic countries because there is the education system from primary to higher education is funded mainly by public funds. And there are not very big differences between academic performance in different education institutions. So if they want to analyze undermatch, they had to go not to the differences between universities, but maybe differences in some programs. So for example, law and medicine are considered to be very prestigious um, programs, academic programs. So that's the way that they how they try to analyze this problem of undermatch. And when there is undermatch, it is not associated with income. It is associated maybe with other characteristics of the family, but no, it is not associated really with income. And finally, there are like, there is a paper from Adriana Camacho and other people. They try to do the following, try to measure like the quality of the academic program using the time in which the between the program was born and the current date. And what they found was that differences in market outcomes are explained mainly by the characteristics of the students, but not by characteristics of the universities. And there is another paper which I think it is the closest one to what we wanted to do, which is a paper from some professors of Universidad Militar. What they tried to do was to explain why there are some differences between Saber Pro in economics, between accredited higher education institutions and non-accredited higher education institutions. And what they found was that the students' characteristics explain the most of these differences in Saber Pro. What we did was to use information from Saber 11, information from 2008 to 2014, and we merged that information with Saber Pro from 2012 to 2018. The institution that gave us this information, they have the key to merge these two data sets. And the cities in which we are going to focus in the explanation of the results are going to be the following ones: Bogotá, Cali, Medellín, Bucaramanga, Barranquilla, Pereira, which is the intermediate city that we choose, Quibdó, Riohacha, San Jose del Guaviare, and Mocoa.
I have a question. So those cities are the cities where the people are from, or are the cities where the institutions are currently?
They are the cities in which when people answer the survey in Saber 11, they say that they were living in these cities. So these are the cities in which people were living when they presented Saber 11. So here we have some of the results. What we did was an estimation of a linear probability model and a probit model. The difference between column 1, 2, and 3 is that in column 1, for example, we don't have characteristics of schools. In column 3, for example, we included cities, and in column 3, we have included family characteristics, schools characteristics, and cities. And the same for column 4, 5, and 6. So here these are the results, which are what we expected. People who comes from families when they have more than 10 times the minimum wage, uh, the probability to be undermatched is less than in comparison to a family that has less than one minimum wage. And the results for the profit here, what I am showing you is the marginal effects. I forgot to tell you that. Education of the parents is also important. When the father and the mother have higher education, these individuals are going to have a lower probability to be undermatched. The positional occupation of the parents is also important. So if the father or the mother is entrepreneur, director, or manager, probability of undermatch is going to be lower. Characteristics of the schools are also important. When these people graduated from a private school, they are going to have a higher probability to be undermatched. When the school has a single shift, there is going to be a lower probability to be undermatched. Let me explain you that in Colombia, schools have many shifts. So there are some schools who has single shift. Other schools have only shift in the night or a Saturday. Um, so when schools have a single shift, they are going to have a lower probability to be undermatched. When the school is bilingual, they also have a lower probability to be undermatched. Let me explain you this. So in Colombia, there are two calendars, calendar A and calendar B. Public schools are in calendar A, and some private schools are in calendar B. Calendar A starts from February and finishes in November, December, while schools in calendar B, they start in August, September, and they finish in April, May. So, and the calendar is also important here. People who are from calendar B, they are going to have a lower probability to be undermatched. When they graduated from a academic school, probability to be undermatched is also going to be lower. In Colombia, there are like, again, 4 types of schools: academic, technical, technological, and some ones whose purpose is to teach students about teaching. That's what we call normalista. And also the category in which the school is in regarding the Saber 11 score of their students is also going to be important. When they are in a school, they graduated from a school in the middle low category of Saber 11, they are going to have a higher probability to be undermatched. And these are some of the results for the cities, which I think are interesting. People who live in Bogota, Cali, Medellin, Bucaramanga, they are going to have a lower probability to be undermatched in comparison to people who live in Pereira. And people who live in Quibdó, Rio Hacha, and San Jose del Guaviare, they are going to have a higher probability to be undermatched in comparison to someone who lived in Pereira. some of these results, mostly the ones related to the cities, are going to change when we do some robustness checks, but I'm going to explain you that in few minutes. But let me go first to this part. The following part, what we tried to do was the following. Well, what groups of characteristics or what groups of variables explain the most of the in this model of the possibility of a person to be undermatched. So what we tried to do was the following. So we estimated 4 models. Some of them are the same that we explained before. And here, what you are going to see is the percentage of students correctly classified, and we are going to use a threshold of 50%. So if in the model it said that an individual had a probability to be undermatched of 61%, I don't know, then we are going to classify him as undermatched. If the probability of this individual to be undermatched is less than 50%, I don't know, 30, then this person is going to be classified as not in undermatched. And in the first model, we only use family characteristics. In the second model, we use family characteristics and cities. When we compare this percentage of correctly classified students with this percentage, we see that including cities is going to improve the results by 3 percentage points. Well, now if we compare model 2 and model 4, the difference is that in model 4 we only use dummies for cities, and in the model 2 we use not only dummies for cities but also family characteristics. And the difference between this percentage and this percentage is a little bit less than 3 percentage points. So using this reasoning, we conclude that dummies for cities are relatively more important in the prediction of correctly classified students. And the following, we are going to compare model 2 and model 3. The only difference is that in this case, we are going to include characteristics of the schools, and the improvement is less than 1 percentage point. So because of this, we can say that schools characteristics are relatively less important than family characteristics and dummies for cities. When we did some robustness checks, so let me explain you what we did in this place. Instead of using because the income, what we have in our paper is we use ranges of income, but instead of the household. So what we are going to do here is try to do if the results are there, even if we use if we don't use household income, but instead use, for example, a stratum or the classification of CISBEN. Yes, there is. Does someone have a question? Okay. So what we see here is that the results are still there, even if we use a stratum instead of the ranges of household income. And here, well, let me explain you this variable. So there is a big program that scores the socioeconomic levels of the households, which is called CISBEN. And these scores are going to be used by social programs in Colombia, so people can be selected to be beneficiaries of some subsidies or something like that. So that is called the CISBEN, and here this variable says that when people are in the category 1, 2, or 3 of CISBEN, then the variable of CISBEN is 1. If they are not registered in the CISBEN system, or they are not classified in the CISBEN system, they are going to have a value of 0 in this variable. And what we see here is that the result is still there. People who are in the lowest categories of the CISBEN, then they are going to have a higher probability to be under.
Anderson, why did you put 0 when the person is not registered at the CISBEN? Shouldn't it be missing so you have less observations, but at least, because what I understand is CISBEN 0 means that your score is pretty low, and CISBEN 100 is that you're like, you have like, I don't know, you are super rich. So by putting everyone that, so persons that do not have CISBEN are biased because they not, they don't have this survey because they don't need it. So when you ask to do the CISBEN is because you want to be target for a program. So when you say like you assign them a 0 at the CISBEN, what you are doing is you are like changing the whole distribution of the CISBEN score. So,
Okay.
and maybe that is why your results goes the other way around, because if you see, this means that the higher the CISBEN scores, the higher the undermatch. So maybe you should take that into account, or maybe I misunderstood what you were saying.
Yes. No, let me explain again this variable. So the CISBEN variable that we are using here is a dummy. So it is 1 or it is 0. So it is 1 when people were in the category 1, 2, or 3 of the CISBEN, and if they were not registered in the CISBEN, or when they weren't classified in the CISBEN system, then the variable of CISBEN is going to take a value of 0. So
Okay,
this
perfect.
CISBEN here is not like a score, but it's a dummy variable.
Okay.
Okay, and the following robustness check, what we did was the following. During this explanation, the way we did the undermatch variable was using the Saber 11, but only the part of maths. So what we tried to do was the following. What changes, if there is any change, instead of using the math part, we use the total score. And if something changes, if instead of using quartiles, we use quartiles, we instead use quintiles. So the results don't change regarding household levels. Results doesn't change neither when for schools characteristics, but results are going to change when we try to analyze what is going on with the cities. So for example, if you remember the main table of this paper, people who was living in Bogota, Cali, Medellin, and Bucaramanga, they had a higher probability to be undermatched. But here in column 4, there is not such a big difference in comparison to live in Pereira. But the result that is still there is that people that live in Quibdó and Riohacha, they have still a higher probability to be undermatched. So that's what I wanted to present to you. The future lines of research, well, it also depends on the data from Colombia. There is a big restriction regarding data there. Um, but what I want to do in the following stages of this process is maybe to include a variable related to credit constraints, with information, with the fees of these universities, and maybe try to use some other measures of quality and also other outcomes for higher education. Or yes, so that's what I wanted to present you, and how you can.
Thank you
Uh,
very much, Anderson.
thank
Does
you, Sarah.
anyone has a question? Okay, so I have a couple. The first one is, well, comments, more than questions. So the first one is, I know. Okay, Diana, Diana, you can open your mic if you want to do your question.
Okay, no worries. You can go ahead. I'll ask after you're
No
done.
worries. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
My only question is, like, since you're using a model to predict characters, so you're using these characteristics to predict, like, how likely someone is to be undermatched in higher education. I was just wondering and like curious if you considered like using machine learning methods to identify those key characteristics, because it seems like it'd be like a really valuable approach, especially for your research.
Okay, yes, no, I didn't think about it. That's a good tool. Um, I don't know, because not only the machine learning tool, but also uh, like the estimations that we have um, are telling like a part of the story, because the other part is like the admission process, like the
Oh, I see.
what is inside between, for example, an interview between the institution and the student. That is something that cannot be modeled, but yes,
Yeah,
I'm
got
going
it.
to, I'm
Got
going
it.
to, thank you
Different
then.
mechanisms. Yeah, sure.
Yes.
So one of my comments was like, I know ICETEX is trying to open his data so you can work with it and have information about credit constraints and credit access, especially because I believe people that have like high scores and are undermatched, one of the main reasons might be like some credit constraints. So maybe they can help you on getting that data. And the other thing, there is this question that, so you are comparing everyone regardless their score and regardless their income distribution. So I was wondering if you try to do like just keeping those at high good scores or something like that, and see their matching on or their undermatch while looking for the university, because yeah, so one undermatch or one kind of what kind of problem might be the score. And I know you put that person in missing value, but maybe there is an effect on that. And the other one will be, and the other one, yeah, that's one of my comments, like how are you trying to do some clusters, because the universities has different cutoffs, and maybe we are not taking that into account. And the other one is that there are, or there might be some group effect, because you have the school, yeah. So maybe you could do some clusters by school or something like that, because if my friends are going to a university and I don't know if there is a way I can afford it, my likelihood of being in that university can increase. Or maybe if all of my friends are going to a university and I have information about the university, or my willingness to look up for the university increases. And that will not be the case if I'm the only one who can go to a good university, and in my school, no one is like looking for that information. So that can also, and you have that information since you have the information by school. So maybe you could do something with that,
Okay, okay. Yes, regarding the last part, yes, we kind of try to solve part of the problem, which is we are computing the standard errors using the cluster. But yes, I understand what you are telling, which is a little bit different, which is to use the information from schools, to see if that there are group effects. Yes, there is in fact a variable which we didn't include here, which is something like, why did you decide to go to this university? Because this university is prestigious, because a friend of my parents told me, or because I have friends studying there. But the problem with this variable is that just very few students answer that question, so the number of observations um, decreases a lot. So that's the only problem. But yes, I will try to use the information of the schools if there is a like a match between the students of some schools and maybe some universities. Okay.
Thank you very much, Anderson. Does anyone else has a question?
Yeah, well, I have a comment very much in line with Diana's one, and it's so like I think the good thing of thinking what kind of a machine learning method you can use it more, because so you have a bunch of covariates that are probably very correlated correlating each other. So like you really put in risk this bias variability trade-off. So maybe if you find like a way to from the data to choose like the best covariates, the ones that explain the most your score, that might be more like meaningful, because yeah, then when you start to explain all these variables, it becomes to, I don't know, to I got like lost in some of them because there are too many, and explain one by one, it's yeah, I think it's complicated to follow and like to make it strong your argument. But yeah, I think it's more like that.
Okay, okay, Daniela. Thank you, Daniela. Yes, that's a problem here because this is like a correlational study. So yes, we try like to explain what happened with all the covariates, and how these covariates were related to undermatch. Yes, yes, maybe I need to focus on some of the covariates instead of explaining all of them.
Okay, thank you very much everyone for joining us, and thank you very much Anderson for this amazing presentation. This record will be uploaded on our YouTube channel, and the presentation is already on our webpage.
Thank you,
Have
Sam.
a
Thank
nice
you,
day.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.